The witness who will tell you how this crash happened has no bias, no prejudice, and no sympathy. This witness has a perfect memory. And this witness is not swayed by money or privilege or power. That witness is Global Positioning System Data, better known as GPS. The GPS from the defendant's boat is how we know the way that this crash occurred. Because the GPS...
There was a boat. That is what he told the police. A boat that cut in front of him, threw a massive wake, forced him to take evasive action. A boat that explained everything. A boat that absolved him of everything. There was no boat. And the device that proved it was sitting on his own vessel the entire time, quietly recording every turn, every speed, every direction, while 17-year-old Lucy Fernandez lay unconscious beneath the surface of Biscayne Bay. This is the state of Florida versus George Pino.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is a case about responsibility and accountability. Or I should say, the lack of both on the part of the defendant in this case, George Pino. The evidence is going to show that on September the 4th of 2022, this defendant took his wife, his 17-year-old daughter, and 11 of her teenage friends out on his boat, and he wound up plowing right into a huge channel marker that ironically was placed in Biscayne Bay to keep boaters safe. As a result of his complete abandonment of good judgment and responsibility, 17-year-old Lucy Fernandez, her given name is Luciana Cristina Fernandez, is dead.
And what you are about to see is what happens when a man tries to outrun the truth, and the truth has perfect memory. Labor Day weekend, 2022. George Pino is the kind of man who plans things.
The defendant, George Pino, and his wife, Cecilia, had planned a wonderful weekend celebration over the Labor Day weekend. Their younger daughter, who was also named Cecilia Pino, but went by Little Ceci, named after her mom, she was going to turn 18 later that week. And so the family invited a bunch of Little Ceci's friends to come to a location called Ocean Reef Resort to have a weekend of fun, hanging out together, going out on the boat, having a celebration dinner. At around 2:52 that Sunday afternoon, they got into George Pino's boat. 12 kids, the defendant, and his wife. Before leaving for Ocean Reef Resort, before leaving the resort, however, that boat was stocked with some food and drinks. And the drinks that were stocked on that boat were not just water, were not just sodas. There was alcohol, lots of it stocked on that boat.
He has rented a house at Ocean Reef Resort on the northern tip of Key Largo for his daughter's birthday weekend. He has booked a catered dinner, custom buffet, outdoor venue, 9 to 11 p.m. He has invited 12 of his younger daughter's closest friends, girls who have known each other since elementary school, girls who have trusted this family for years. He has stocked his 29-foot center console boat with food, drinks, and alcohol. Lots of it. His words, according to the prosecution. His choices, according to the evidence. At 2:52 that Sunday afternoon, 14 people climbed aboard George Pino's boat and headed north through the narrow waterways of Biscayne Bay toward a popular sandbar gathering spot. To understand what happened next, you need to understand one thing about how boating works in Florida. Biscayne Bay is largely shallow. Large vessels cannot simply travel anywhere they want. They need depth. So in the shallow areas, channels are dredged out, excavated to create lanes of deeper water where bigger boats can safely travel. And to mark those channels, large steel poles are installed on either side, channel markers, painted in specific colors and numbered so that boaters always know exactly where they are. On one side, odd-numbered markers in bright, daylight-visible green. On the other side, even-numbered markers in red. The rule is straightforward. Stay on the right side of the channel, starboard. The same basic logic we use on American roads. This is not advanced seamanship. It is the first thing you learn.
Now, for those that might not be boaters, what you'll learn in this case is that a channel is an area of the bay that's dredged out to be deep, because a lot of Biscayne Bay is relatively shallow. And if a large boat that has a keel under it has a draft that's too far, that boat's going to run aground, and that'll cause a danger to everyone. So in areas where the bay is shallow, there will be dredged out locations. And to keep people safe and to let boaters know where they can maneuver their maybe larger vessels, there are what's called channel markers on either side. They're big steel poles, and on one side of the channel there will be odd-numbered markers in day-glow green, and on the other side there will be even-numbered markers in red.
George Pino had passed channel marker number 15 many times before. This was his water playground, as the prosecution would put it. He knew these waters. He knew that marker. And on the way up to the sandbar that afternoon, his GPS, his onboard navigation device, shows him traveling at moderate speeds, taking careful turns, navigating around other holiday weekend traffic like a man who understood where he was. The afternoon unfolded the way those afternoons do. Music, swimming, the girls floating between boats, interacting with boys from a neighboring vessel whose owner was a friend of the Pinos, and yes, drinking. The teenagers on the defendant's boat helped themselves to alcohol the adults had provided. The adults themselves drank. George Pino drank.
They would hang on to floating devices, interact with each other, and yeah, they were drinking. The teens on the boat, on Mr. Pino's boat, helped themselves to alcoholic drinks that the Pinos provided. The adults kind of knew what was going on, and the thought was, look, if kids are going to drink, it's better if they're drinking in the company of hopefully responsible adults, rather than do something on their own. But the teenagers weren't the only ones that had consumed alcohol that afternoon. So did Mr. Pino.
The prosecution is careful here. He is not charged with operating under the influence. The charge is not about blood alcohol. The charge is about what a person in full possession of his responsibilities chose to do with 14 human lives in his care. Then there is a detail so quietly devastating that it is easy to miss the first time. Lucy Fernandez's parents were also at Ocean Reef that weekend. Her father was tired. He had golfed that morning. But when their 17-year-old daughter called and said, "Come out to the sandbar, come meet us," he and his wife got in their own boat and made the trip. Because when your teenager wants to see you, even when she is surrounded by friends, you go. Andy Fernandez was planning to leave by 5:30 so he could watch the FSU-LSU game with his father. He and his wife said their goodbyes. And before she jumped back into the water, Lucy swam over to their boat. She asked her dad for sunscreen and a hair tie. She hugged him. That was the last time Andy Fernandez ever held his daughter.
At one point that afternoon, Lucy's mom and dad, who were also at Ocean Reef, had been asked by their daughter, "Mom, Dad, come on out to the boat. We're going out with the Pinos. Come meet us out at the sandbar." Now, Lucy's dad, who you'll meet during this trial, he was kind of tired. He had golfed earlier in the day, but he and his wife figured, if your teenage kid is saying that she wants to see you, even when she's with a lot of her friends, let's suck it up. Let's go. We're going to go see our daughter. And so Mr. and Mrs. Fernandez took their own boat out and wound up rendezvousing with where the Pino boat was and a couple of the other boats that were there. What you'll learn is that Mr. Fernandez didn't really want to stay a very long time because he had plans later that day to watch the game between FSU and LSU with his dad, who lived at Ocean Reef. So his plan was to go out there, see his daughter, engage with the people that they all knew, and then try to leave by around 5:30 or so that he could be back in time to clean off the boat, get cleaned up, and then go over to his dad's condo on Ocean Reef. While Mr. Fernandez is there, he too consumes some alcohol. He winds up toward the end of the day getting ready to leave. And as he and his wife are getting ready to leave, they kind of thought about what a great afternoon it had been. They were glad that they'd gone out to see their daughter. At one point, their daughter swims over to the boat, and she asks her dad for some sunscreen and a hair tie, to make a ponytail with her hair. She hugged her dad before jumping back off the boat, and that was the last time Andy Fernandez ever got to hug his child.
If you're asking yourself right now how a day that looked like that could end the way it did, that is exactly the question this trial was built to answer. After nearly 3 hours at the sandbar, the party was winding down. George Pino had dinner to get back to, 12 teenage girls who needed to shower, dry their hair, and be ready for a 9 o'clock catered event. Time was running short. When he fired the GPS back up at 6:18 p.m. and began heading south through Cutterbank Channel toward Ocean Reef, something about his driving had changed.
So what winds up happening is, as he's heading back toward Ocean Reef, he is going faster than when he was going up there. And when he was going up to the sandbar, we know from the GPS that he was kind of circumnavigating things like this. What we know from the GPS is that when he was coming back, he was doing a lot more straight through traveling.
On the way up, the GPS shows what it always shows, from an attentive boater. Small course corrections, gentle adjustments, a man navigating traffic and reading the water. On the way back, the pattern is different. Straight lines. Long, unbroken straight lines. He was moving with purpose. He was moving fast. The boat was on a plane, a nautical term meaning the vessel is traveling at such speed that it lifts and skims across the surface of the water rather than pushing through it. He was on the wrong side of the channel.
George Pino operated his boat on a plane, which means that it's basically just skimming the surface of the water. He's gotten so fast that the boat is just traveling on top of the water. He's operating it on the port side, meaning the left side of the channel, not the right. And as he was going through that channel, heading back to Ocean Reef, just as he had his GPS on the way up, his GPS was on the way back. The GPS on his boat tracked his every move, his direction, when he changed direction, and it tracked his speed. The GPS on his boat was like a silent witness, watching and recording his every move.
The left side, port, not starboard, wrong side. And he was accelerating. Now, here is where this case becomes something other than a tragedy. Here is where it becomes a reckoning. The GPS data, stored on a device called a Simrad, which is essentially the onboard navigation system, think of it like the maritime equivalent of CarPlay, recorded every position change, every speed reading, every moment the boat altered its heading. And what that data shows is this. At 6:37 and 28 seconds, George Pino made his last course adjustment. He nudged the boat 5 degrees to the left. A small movement, almost nothing. But in a narrow channel at nearly 50 miles per hour, 5 degrees is the difference between a close call and a catastrophe. At that moment, he was on an absolute collision course with channel marker 15. He was going 43 miles per hour. 9 seconds. For 9 full seconds.
This all came as a shock to them. It should not have been a shock to the defendant because the evidence will show that 9 seconds prior to impact, George Pino changed direction just 5 degrees to port, just a little nudge to the left side of that channel. And when he did that, he was on a complete collision course. An absolute collision course with where channel marker 15 is. For 9 seconds, from this moment, when you're out on the water, as you'll learn in this case, you can see that channel marker ahead of you, if you're looking. For 9 seconds, he never changes direction. He smashes right into it. And to give you an idea of how long that is,
after that final course adjustment, channel marker 15 was directly in front of him. Visible, unavoidable if you were looking. A large steel pole with a bright daylight green board at the top, marked with the number 15. A channel marker he had passed dozens of times before on these exact waters. He never changed direction. He hit that marker at 47 miles per hour, accelerating. Think about that for a moment. Not decelerating, not reacting, accelerating. The GPS does not lie about acceleration. The GPS does not misremember. And the prosecution would make that point in a way the defense would find very difficult to answer. Here's the question I want you to sit with. If you knew you were in charge of 14 people on open water, how long do you think you could keep your eyes ahead? How many seconds would you need to see a steel pole the size of the one that killed Lucy Fernandez? If your answer is less than 9, I would be genuinely curious to hear your reasoning in the comments. Boats are not cars. That distinction matters enormously here. Cars are made of metal. They crumple on impact in ways engineered to absorb force. Boats are made of fiberglass. Fiberglass is plastic, and plastic does not crumple. It flexes, and then it tears. When the bow of George Pino's vessel struck channel marker 15, the boat rode up on the pole. The number board at the top of the marker, the board that said 15, gouged through the hole like a blade. It ripped the boat open.
boats, unlike cars, are not made of metal. They're made of fiberglass, which is plastic. And unlike metal that crunches and crashes, plastic flexes. So when he first hits that, the boat flexes. And what winds up happening is the boat rides up on the channel marker and literally is gouged open by the board that's at the top of that channel marker that says 15. And it rips the boat right open. When it comes to the other side of the channel marker, it's taking on water like crazy through this gigantic, gash mark in the boat. And as the boat is in the water and taking on all this water, it flips.
The vessel came off the other side of the marker, taking on water at a catastrophic rate. And then it flipped. 14 people in the water, in broad daylight, on Labor Day weekend. The girls were calling out for each other. Where is Cece? Where is Katie? Where is Mia? Where is Carol? One by one, through the chaos, each girl was accounted for. Some were barely conscious. Some were injured. Good Samaritans from nearby boats pulled people from the water. First responders struggled to give coordinates because you cannot look up and see a street sign on open water. A helicopter tried to lower a paramedic onto a small boat, but the rotor wash was making the boat spin. so police vessels had to physically brace against it on both sides to hold it steady enough for the paramedic to land. And still, through all of it, one person was missing. Where is Lucy? Where is Lucy? Someone called out to the defendant, still clinging to the hull of his overturned vessel. Look under the boat. Maybe she is trapped underneath. She was not trapped. She was unconscious. She drowned.
Looking and looking. Where's Lucy? Where's Lucy? Somebody yells to the defendant, still holding on to his boat. Look under the boat. Maybe she's trapped under there. She was. The injuries she sustained were not great injuries, but she didn't die from those injuries. She died because she drowned.
Her injuries from the impact were not severe enough to kill her. It was the water that killed her. Underwater, unconscious, alone. While officers took turns performing CPR on her body all the way to Elliott Key, while fire rescue tried to intubate her, while a helicopter raced to get her to a hospital. Lucy Fernandez was 17 years old. And now, here is where we get to the lie. Because this is not just a story about recklessness. This is a story about what a man chose to do in the aftermath of recklessness. And that choice is what elevated this case from a tragedy to a criminal proceeding. Lieutenant William Thompson of the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission.
As you can imagine, a scene like this is pretty chaotic. The man who was tasked with the responsibility of managing this chaos is named William Thompson. He was, at the time, an investigator with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, better known as FWC. Since the time of this crash, he's been promoted, and he is now a lieutenant. Lieutenant Thompson was responsible for coordinating with all the different responders that came to this scene. Officers from the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Marine Patrol Unit. There were Coast Guard officials that came to the scene. There was other fire rescue units that came to the scene. There's the management of finding out who's injured, what's the level of injuries, conducting that kind of triage, figuring out what hospitals different people are going to go to. And beyond that, he also needed to find out what happened. How did this happen? The girls really couldn't give him any information.
A calm, methodical investigator who has since been promoted arrived at the scene and needed to know what happened. The girls on the boat could not tell him. Their backs had been to the direction of travel. The defendant's wife had been on her phone. The only person who could explain the crash was George Pino. He was injured, but alert. He was able to walk, he was able to speak, and he spoke. He told Lieutenant Thompson there was another vessel, a boat that had come at him and thrown a massive wake, a boat that had forced him to take evasive action to protect his passengers, a boat that had caused everything. He said it in detail, out loud, on camera.
But the way he does it was an abdication of his responsibility and accountability, because the evidence in this case is going to show that what he said happened did not happen. What he did to avoid responsibility and accountability is he told this story to Lieutenant Thompson that there was this other vessel that had thrown a big wake in his way, and to keep his passengers safe, he had to try to attack through the wake, like taking evasive action. But we know from the GPS, which Lieutenant Thompson didn't have at that moment, he was on a straight course. I showed you. It was for 9 seconds straight ahead. There was no other boat.
Because Lieutenant Thompson was wearing a body-worn camera, a chest-mounted recording device that captured the entire conversation. Then he wrote it down. He wrote, "Passing a boat on the left side."
He told this story of the phantom vessel. He then was asked would you give a written statement about what happened? This is what he wrote. Going back to ORC, Ocean Reef Club, through channel, pass boat on left side of my boat. Veer to the right to avoid big waves. Coming back into the wave, I lost control of steering wheel as boat was going through the big waves. I was ejected from the boat. That's what he said happened. He said it in more detail orally to Lieutenant Thompson, but that's what he wrote. And even when the GPS proved that he was wrong, he doubled down on the things he said to Lieutenant Thompson. Because in the aftermath of this crash, there was a lawsuit against the defendant. And you'll learn that in civil lawsuits, one of the things that happens is a civil attorney may say to the person that they're suing, tell us about how this crash happened. And that kind of a document is called an interrogatory. And when you answer an interrogatory, your answer has to be under oath through the penalties of perjury even. And when he was asked in this interrogatory, how did this crash happen? You know what he said? What I said to Lieutenant Thompson, that's how the crash happened.
Veering right to avoid big waves. Coming back into the wave, lost control, ejected. That is his account. That is what he signed. There was no other boat. The GPS, his own GPS, from his own vessel, recovered by experts who pulled the data even after the Simrad had been upside down and submerged, showed a straight course for 9 seconds. No evasive action, no sudden turn, no wake to navigate. A straight line at increasing speed directly into channel marker 15. He did not just say it once. When a civil lawsuit was filed against him in the aftermath of Lucy's death, he was asked under oath through a legal document called an interrogatory, meaning his answers carried the full weight of perjury consequences. How did this crash happen? He said the same thing. The phantom boat, the wake, the evasive action. Under oath. And the GPS said no. Now consider the detail that makes this particular act of apparent self-preservation especially difficult to defend. George Pino, in what prosecutors describe as an effort to appear cooperative, voluntarily signed a consent form giving police permission to board his boat and retrieve the Simrad navigation devices. He handed them the key to the vault. He signed the form that put the GPS data into investigators' hands. The expert who analyzed that data, Paul Albear, a former FWC officer, current internal affairs supervisor with Palm Beach Police, and qualified maritime GPS analyst who testifies regularly on these exact questions, stated unequivocally, no evasive action was taken. No other vessel was present in that vicinity. The defendant's own boat, on the defendant's own GPS, recorded by a device the defendant voluntarily surrendered, told a story that directly contradicted every word the defendant said. To give the jury a physical sense of what 47 miles per hour through a narrow channel actually feels like, prosecutors arranged a recreation.
Now, it would not be practical for you all as jurors to go out to the scene of this vessel crash and feel for yourself what it's like to go 47 miles an hour through that narrow channel on the wrong side of it. So Lieutenant Thompson and Mr. Albear did the best that they could to try to recreate it for any jurors that might be on this panel, whether you have experience boating or not. What they did was, using buoys and GPS points, they dropped one buoy in the Cutter Bank Channel where the second to last track point is, and one right before the last track mark, which is less than 30 feet away from where that channel marker is. They then had Lieutenant Thompson take his police vessel, which, like the defendant's, is 29 feet, has a center console, and has two 300 horsepower engines. And what he did was he then began coming through the channel, and by the time he got to where that second to last track mark is, he was going 43 miles an hour. He then continues to accelerate his vessel until he's at 47 miles an hour, and at the last second, swerves to avoid hitting the channel marker. To give you an idea of what that's like, we had a veteran crime scene detective with the sheriff's office come out on a Marine Patrol boat and launch a drone that then could film the boat as Lieutenant Thompson piloted it through the channel. In addition, a GoPro camera was affixed to the front of Lieutenant Thompson's boat so that jurors could get an eye view of what you could see if you're looking and when you can see that channel marker up ahead. In addition, a GoPro camera was attached to the actual channel marker so that you could see that same approach as Lieutenant Thompson comes right up to it and avoids hitting it at the last second.
A 29-foot police vessel, same length, same center console configuration, 2 300-horsepower engines, was piloted by Lieutenant Thompson through the Cutter Bank Channel. Drone footage from above, a GoPro on the bow, a GoPro mounted on channel marker 15 itself, facing outward, showing exactly what approached it and when. The channel was cleared, police boats on both ends, officers aboard wearing personal flotation devices, life jackets. And before Thompson made his run, the prosecution noted for the jury with a precision that landed like a dropped stone, Lieutenant Thompson did not consume 2 beers before this exercise. George Pino said 2 beers. The GPS said 47 miles per hour. The jury would see both and decide what the combination produced. Here is the legal lesson, and it matters whether you ever set foot in a courtroom or not. When you find yourself in a situation where something has gone wrong, the instinct to protect yourself is human. The instinct to minimize, to explain, to construct a narrative that softens your own role, that instinct is human. But in a world where devices record everything, where GPS tracks every movement, where body cameras capture every word, the calculation has changed entirely. A version of events that contradicts the physical record does not just fail to protect you, it becomes its own evidence of consciousness of guilt, a legal concept meaning that the act of lying and the specific shape of the lie can itself be used to demonstrate that the person knew they had done something wrong. George Pino did not have to invent a phantom boat. The GPS would have shown what happened regardless. But because he invented one, because he put it in writing, because he repeated it under oath when attorneys in a civil suit gave him a second chance to tell the truth, because he doubled down when the data was all...
There's no evidence to conclusively prove that George Pino was drunk. He's not charged with boating under the influence, causing a death. There's no evidence that he deliberately crashed his boat into that channel marker. If the evidence supported that, he wouldn't be charged with manslaughter and vessel homicide. He'd be charged with murder. But the evidence does support a finding that traveling through that narrow channel at the speeds that he was, with as many people on his boat as he had, people who had been consuming alcohol, people who were 17 years old, and not looking where the heck he was going for 9 seconds. People won't even drive blindfolded for 9 seconds. They sure as heck should not be operating a boat with a blind eye. The evidence in this case will show conclusively this was not just an accident. This was a bunch of factors that, when they all come together, form the inescapable conclusion that George Pino was reckless and he was culpably negligent, and as a result, Lucy's gone.
When 12 people tried to decide what kind of man George Pino was when no one was watching, except someone was watching. It had a perfect memory, and it did not need 2 beers to keep its story straight. If you ever find yourself at the helm of anything, a boat, a vehicle, a decision that puts other people at risk, Remember Lucy Fernandez. Remember that the 9 seconds you spend not looking are not 9 seconds you get back. And remember that the devices around you are always keeping count.